That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, here we are again with another episode of Ugly, Irresponsible, and Childish. I'm Jeremy Baca.
I'm Mark Levy. How are you, Jer?
I'm awesome, brother. We are here to as part of this episode where two industry vets talk about the unrelenting pursuit of creativity and the people, work, and culture that either celebrates it and suffocates it. And we have this underlying motto that we risk our careers so you don't have to. And the guest we have today has done that throughout his entire life. He's kind of risked his career over and over in the pursuit of and celebration of and protection of his ideas. We have Mr. Joe Eszterhas, legendary Hollywood screenwriter and author. Joe Eszterhas joining us again today. Joe, thanks for hopping on with us for another episode here.
My pleasure.
Yeah, especially now we're into the fourth hour of this. So I am pretty sure when we first asked you to do this, you were like, yeah, I'll talk to these guys for a little bit. Hour 72. you're like writing notes home like a Civil War soldier. My dearest Naomi.
I was fearing that we'd get to 99, but good. It's only 72. I'm ready.
Joe called yesterday, Mark. Joe called them the stations of the cross, where it's just one station after the next, and we're dragging him through it here.
Excellent.
But you know,
well,
Joe,
thank you for being back.
Yeah, all kidding aside,
Thank you, guys.
the learnings we are getting this just as two people that spent our careers dedicated to coming up with ideas and creativity and some of the same struggles, but an entirely different industry. We don't have studio executives; we call them clients, and sometimes our own account teams who were struggling to defend our ideas against and to try and push creative thinking through. Lots of learnings from you throughout all these episodes, and we're gonna on this episode we're gonna change the tone and the course a little bit, and we're gonna get into a very profound and sobering topic in many ways, an experience that not only changed Joe's life but certainly changed his relationship with his father, which we're gonna talk about. But before we get into that, I just want to remind the listeners and viewers out there that Joe is a throat cancer survivor, which is another journey that we'll talk about down the road. But so that raspy voice that you hear is a larynx that has been recreated in his throat, and he managed to survive. And so we just want to let you know that if sometimes it may be difficult to hear or understand him, that to give him a little break because he has been through quite a journey of his own. And Mark, I know you can appreciate the cancer journey. You had one of your own as well.
Jeremy, I want to correct that a little bit.
Yeah.
Part of it is throat cancer. The other part that's significant is 82 years in the world. The two came together.
Oh, and then there's that. I thought you were going to say, and then there's 20 years of smoking and vodka and all the other stuff we can't mention.
The smoking is there, gin is there, never vodka, and there's a certain white powder in there as well for years. But those are sins that I usually confess to in public. Now, if I may suggest to you gentlemen that we move on.
Yeah. Wait, the phone's ringing. I think that's the Cleveland police. Well, Joe, all kidding aside, in the last episode, we talked about how you were riding this wave in Hollywood, and certainly at the beginning it was wonderful and fantastic. But then it became, there were countless creative battles. It almost became exhausting at one point with the premieres and the parties and the limos and the scene and be seen by culture and things like that. It became tiring and a bit overwhelming at one point. But during the height of your career, that's the wave you were riding, and you just had one hit after another and became like the golden boy of Hollywood, where people thought you had some of that creative magic that could lead them to a box office hit. And one of the things we touched on in the earlier episodes that we want to drill down a little more on this episode is you mentioned your father in the past, and in one of the episodes, I recall you being like a juvenile delinquent, and your father taking you to this bridge that overlooked the factories of Cleveland, and your dad is like, "Hey, dude, is this where you want to work? And if that's where you want to work, fine. But if you are looking for something more, then you got to get your shit together, basically." So he, as the only child, he was your muse. He was your guide. He was your confidant in many ways. What was he thinking during all of this fame and fortune that you were experiencing? I'm wondering what. Let's talk a little bit about how he was looking at all this, particularly in light of a movie that you had called Music Box. So we're going to cover all that, but just for starters, what was he thinking about all this, Joe?
Let me back up a little bit and
Yeah,
describe him to you.
yeah.
Let me back up a bit further. One of the reasons he was so important to me is because my mom was a paranoid schizophrenic who had been damaged by the war and by her life. And my constant memory of my mother is sitting in a dark kitchen with an ice bag over her head and a cigarette in her mouth and saying prayers. Um, she would do things like cement the windows because, quote, they were after her. Um, my dad was very much of an intellectual. He's a very cerebral man. The written novels. He was a little man who had scarlet fever as a child, and it was difficult for him to move and walk. And his interests were very cerebral interests having to do with literature and poetry and things like that. The when I got into juvenile trouble, both big and little, he was always there to try to convince me that I was better than that. The some of the trouble was hilarious because at one point the room where I slept on Lorraine Avenue overlooked a bar called Babs, a Hungarian emigre bar, and it was with a big neon sign. And my dad made the mistake of giving me a BB gun for one Christmas, and I used this BB gun to shoot out all the neon in the signs. The cops were summoned. They looked at the angle of the windows. They'd heard about my previous juvenile issues, and they came and explained that this couldn't go on. And my father stuck up for me. Somehow came up with the money to cover the neon, um, and he was always there. He was the only person who was really always there, and it culminated in that moment that you mentioned, Jeremy, about taking me out on a bridge and looking at the factory workers on a 90-degree night and saying, is this what you want to be, Yoshi? Because this is the path you're on. In terms of my success in Hollywood, and much of it, the basic instinct and showgirls and all of that were past this period that we're talking about now. But I would take him on the fifth premiere. I would take my dad, and we wound up. My first wife and I wound up walking down the red carpet with my father beside me. The On several other occasions, I asked him to LA when I went to LA, and we went to various fancy restaurants where he invariably tried to eat a corned beef sandwich because that was his favorite in the world, even in the fanciest fish food places. The We had fun together, and we enjoyed each other, and I loved him very much. My mother was sort of blocked off from me for the reasons that I told you about. So it all fell on him. And in terms of my life outside of the family, of our family. It was very American. I lived in two worlds. And my world at home was focused on Hungarian events and Hungarian things and Hungarian Boy Scouts, and my other world had to do with rock and roll and baseball, the and getting into trouble in the alleys and all of those things. So he was a rock, always behind me and always supportive.
Did he?
Joe, one of the things that Jeremy and I always kind of talk about and debate, and I frankly, I still don't know where I am, which side of the argument I come down on this idea of nature versus nurture when it comes to creativity. Can creativity can be taught? Is it about the environment you're in, or is it genetic? Your dad was an author in Hungary and edited, I believe, the Hungarian language newspaper uh, uh, that was published by the church, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? Do I have that right?
No, Mark, he was an author in Hungary, and I discovered he did other things as well. But he was the editor of the Hungarian Catholic newspaper in Cleveland, the
Got it.
Catholic Hungarian Sunday, run
Okay.
by run by a group of Franciscan priests.
Do you think that you, in quotes, inherited your writing skills from your dad, or do you think that's something that came just naturally to you, or a product of your surroundings? Can you think about that at all?
I can't answer that. I'm not sure, but what I certainly learned from him, and he tried to teach me, and he successfully did, is he said, read. I was getting into all this trouble in the alleys, and some of it was serious. And he said, read, read some books. See if that you have fun with that. And I began doing that. And the reading, this imaginary world that came into my head certainly had a lot to do with my writing, because after a while I thought to myself, maybe I can do this. And because I had so much fun reading it.
Got it. Got it.
Joe, Joe, I what I'm trying to understand is, so your dad is the poor immigrant who was also kind of like your moral compass in your early years, right?
Yes.
He would ground you. And then suddenly he sees you in this Hollywood environment that is the antithesis of morality in a lot of ways. And he had to see some of that or hear about some of that. Did he weigh in on, you know, Joe, please, you need to stay grounded. Don't get too full of yourself. You don't need all these written, fame trappings. Or was he like, yeah, this is cool. Let's do this. Where did he net out on all that?
Well, I don't think I certainly didn't view Hollywood as the antithesis of morality.
Hmm.
The that never entered my thinking. I liked many of the people there.
Mhm.
People were human, and I understood that. And people had faults. But my father was not an especially religious man, as my mother was a religious fanatic, I would say, almost, because her favorite reading was Thomas à Kempis's The Imitation of Christ, which she read over and over and over again. But my dad was much more worldly in that sense. And on occasion, as when I became a teenager, we would talk about his semi-amatory experiences as a young man, and laugh a lot together. So there was none of that with him.
There was none of that. He was seller, and there was no jealousy. I mean, as a writer, he did.
Oh, no, God, no. He was really proud of what I'd done. He was overwhelmingly thankful that I included him in, that he was there on the red carpet with hundreds of photographers around. He was all dressed up. Then if I had a suite at the Beverly Wilshire, then I made sure that we either had a two-bedroom suite, Jerry and I, that where he could join us, or that an adjoining suite. And actually, one time I remember we had checked into the Wilshire, and we had a connecting suite, and I was walking through on the way to some appointment, and then they called me over to the desk and said, "Sir, we have an emergency call for you." And my dad was on the other line, and he said, "Can you get up here, please? I need some help." So I hurried up and I got out of the elevator, and I saw This little old man at the end of the foyer, but near his room, in his gotchish Hungarian shorts, standing there all huddled up.
Oh my God.
He had somehow locked himself out of
Oh,
the street. Instead of going through the right door, he went through the other one. So then and then we had fun, and then he reveled in my success.
one of the movies you said he particularly liked for its statement about justice and and the importance of I guess this morality that I talked about was Music Box. And can you tell me a little bit about the what the movie, or tell our listeners a little bit about what the movie Music Box was about, and what your dad perhaps liked about it in particular?
I don't think it had to do with morality. The Let me back up with my dad as I was growing up. The My father always taught me that the only thing that mattered is a person's character, not his religion, not his skin color, only his character. And the always urged me not to be judgmental. He and I agree as an adult. He talked about life being great and people having black and white combinations, and not to judge them too quickly, but to assess all of those things. Music Box was a story about a young woman, young middle-aged woman who was a lawyer of Hungarian descent, who discovers one day that her father is being charged with war crimes that he committed in Hungary. It was a controversial film in the Hungarian community. And there were many Hungarians who took umbrage at it, and there were articles written about me saying that I was a traitor to my heritage. Someone in the Hungarian parliament in Budapest actually made a speech about me, about how much of a traitor I was and how I should be dishonored for what I did
Wow.
for writing it, because the focus of the piece was really how Jewish Hungarians had been abused and sent to Auschwitz, and then literally taken down to the banks of the Danube when the Hungarians had run out of ammunition and the Russians were coming, and either strangled manually, or they tied two people together because they were out of ammunition, and then shoot the first one and then dump them into the Danube. The it was the most reprehensible period in Hungary that I've read about or heard about, and I wrote this whole film about it. And it was on the front pages of newspapers everywhere once again. Now, my father went to the opening of the film in Cleveland and called me afterwards and said that he had never been prouder of me than he was at that moment. We had a wonderful conversation. Weeks later, he told me that he went to a Hungarian event, and the Hungarians there booed and hissed him when he arrived because of my film, and he was proud of the fact that they booed and hissed him, and he told me not because he felt that he kind of hurt by it, but he laughed about it and said that's what happened. Um, the the uh, the About, I guess about a year later, a year and a half later, I was in, he told me that he got a letter from the
Actually,
American.
Joe, before we get there,
Okay.
I'm just curious in terms of Music Box, and I know this is a difficult question, knowing what we all know now and what we're about to share. Can you look back at that time? This is again after Betrayed, right before Basic Instinct. Um, can 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 you isolate the inspiration for writing that film? Uh, like where was your head at? Especially because you specifically made it about the Hungarian experience. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I had read about the Hungarians during the Second World War. Not focused reading, but general reading. I'd read about the Holocaust. And I'd read generally about what had happened in Hungary. I never really talked about it with my parents, but when I did, my father said that they didn't know anything about it. The I guess somewhere in the past I tucked it away in my head someplace because I thought about it, but sort of casually. And then one day Jane Fonda and I were together, and Jane and I were friends and had been for some time. And we're going to do a couple of movies that fell out. She wanted me to do another one, and I didn't like it. And then I suddenly said, "What do you think about a woman lawyer who's dad?" Blah blah blah. And Jane said, "I'm in. It's wonderful. Let's do it." And ultimately, Eszterhas directed it, and he didn't like Jane for it because he thought she was too old. So Jane wound up not being in the film, but Jessica Lange did. And then I wrote it, sat down and wrote it, and it worked. Costa Gavras said he loved it and loved every page. But actually, he and I came up with a new ending for it. And Irwin Winkler was the producer, and Irwin had produced Betrayed. So it got a relatively easy start, and as it went out there.
So go ahead
the
now to. Oh, I'm sorry, Jerry. I was going to
well,
say
I'm sorry. I was just thinking this movie also won the Emmanuel Award. Is that correct, Joe? The Emmanuel.
Yeah, the Emmanuel Foundation Award was for a lifetime achievement of writing about the Holocaust in Hungary. The Emmanuel Foundation is, I think, the largest Hungarian foundation in the country. And of course that happened sometime later after the film was out.
So this is unfolding. Your father goes to the premiere. He is proud of you. He's like,
He doesn't go to the premiere. He goes to the first showing in Cleveland.
oh, okay, the first showing. Okay. And he gets booed and hissed in the local Hungarian clubs. And but I want to jump ahead a little bit because this is where this story gets absolutely crazy, and some would say even disturbing in a lot of ways.
one of the things that I think it's important for our audience to know because it informs the framework of this story is that throughout your entire childhood, your father was amongst the staunchest of defenders of Jews and the Jewish faith and railing against anti-Semitism, fighting against the publishers of the paper who wanted to push more anti-Semitic tone. So he instilled that hey, Jews are like everybody else. They shouldn't be singled out. No one should be singled out, really. But what the Jews have gone through, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's is that how you remember it, or?
I do. I remember him with endless arguments. And we lived in a very small apartment. One of the rooms was his so-called office. And I remember him in endless arguments with Hungarians who were anti-Semites, and with the priests who ran the paper who were violent anti-Semites. And I remember my father yelling endlessly with them and saying, "You're crazy. You mustn't talk like this. This world has totally changed." And it was an endless argument. And at the same time, he instilled the same kinds of things in me. I had read on my own, when my reading began, and I had seen this kind of endless anti-Semitism. I had read myself about Hungary. There wasn't much published at that point about the Hungarian Holocaust, but there was a lot of things about the Holocaust in general and Hitler and Kristallnacht and the way Hitler began and all of that. So But yeah, I saw my dad in those endless arguments, and I saw those priests behaving horribly and saying awful things, which was my first taste of the anti-Semitism that I think has riddled the Catholic Church historically.
Okay, so now with this worldview in place, you've written and Music Box has gone on to critical success, if not overwhelming box office success. 5 years later, your dad gets a letter.
It wasn't five. The letter came and the hearings began in 91. And I think the
Okay.
movie was released in 1987 or 89. I'm not sure which. It was
Okay.
a few years down the line. It was before Basic and Showgirls and Telling Lies and an Alan Smithy film. But there was just only a couple of years. The hearings were only a couple of years after the release of the film.
And tell
Okay.
us what was that letter, Joe? Tell us how this story
Um,
unfolds.
I was in LA and I got a phone call from my ex-wife who said that my father was desperately trying to reach me and he sounded very upset. So I called him right away. And he said that he had gotten a letter from the Justice Department, from the Office of the Special Investigations. And the letter informed him that he was the target of an investigation that they were working on for alleged war crimes committed in Hungary in the 40s, and that hearings would begin in Cleveland quickly, very soon. And of course, I was open mouthed and flabbergasted, and of course thinking about Music Box and the I called an old friend, one of my best friends in Cleveland, who was an attorney, a very prominent attorney, was a Jewish man named Jerry Messerman, who had lost people in the Holocaust. A nationally known attorney, Everly Bailey, once was asked by Larry King if he got into trouble, who would he go to? And he said, "There's this man in Cleveland named Jerry Messerman, and I would ask him to represent me." Anyway, we were very close friends, one of my best friends, and I told him, and he said he was shocked by it as well. He said, "Let me make some phone calls." And he called me back a couple of later, and he said, "This is very serious. You get back here as soon as you can." And I said, "I'll be there tomorrow." Um, so I went and we got the letter, and Jerry and I talked to my father, and my father said this is a mistake, almost using the same words that Armand Mueller-Stahl had used in Music Box. They have the wrong man. I didn't do anything wrong. I have no idea what it is. The Jerry was told by somebody at the OSI that one of the things that they were going to talk about was a book of his called Nemzet Politika. It was written in the 30s, and according to what Jerry heard, it was flagrantly anti-Semitic.
Oh,
Now, for our listeners, I want to frame this up, and this is something that I had not thought about, Joe, until you wrote about it in your book. That the reason this is all happening now is kind of a bizarre, set of circumstances. In that this is the early '90s now. Okay, the Iron Curtain has begun to fall around Eastern European communist republics. And because of that, and because of the normalization of diplomatic ties with the United States, we are, the United States government, for the first time, able to access historical files on World War II and the kind of spread of the Nazi Party and that ideologically that we never had an understanding of before. So this isn't like they picked Joe's dad out of a leaflet and decided, okay, we're going to choose this name. It's because we had all this information that we never had before.
Yeah, it's very true. There began a cooperation between the American Justice Department and the new Hungarian Justice Department, post-communist. The Americans essentially got all of their files, all of their previous files. And in terms of Nemzet Politika, the book, they said that they told Jerry that they would send the book to us so we could see what it was. My father said he didn't have the book. He had talked about the book as one of his books he was never able to find in America. Um, so we set up a meeting the next day with my dad and I and Jerry Messerman.
Now, Joe, I guess the question that's just killing me here that I got to ask, like you said just a few minutes ago that your dad started essentially reading lines from from Music Box, just like Armin Stuhler,
Oh, yes, yes.
uh, as just as he did it. At what point is the just surrealness of all this hitting you? Like, how are you maintaining your sanity in this moment? As again, audience members, for those of you who are not 100% clear, I want to put a fine point on this. Joe wrote a movie that several years later is now coming to life in real life in his own family. Like, I cannot imagine what a complete mind fuck that is.
The big mindfuck moment with me was at a point of the hearings, which of course I'll get into in a moment. But at a certain point in the hearings, my father had difficulty reaching the microphone as he was speaking. And one of the Justice Department guys reached behind him and pulled something out and put it under the mic, pushed it toward him. It was a videotape of Music Box.
Oh my God. So they put the mic to raise it a little and used Music Box, the cassette of
Yeah,
Music Box.
exactly.
Oh my God.
Right.
My God.
That was a moment. The other moment that I found is shocking is in the course of these hearings, my religious, saintly mother, um, with her mental illness, but daily rosary sayer and getting together with her prayer circle, all of that. One of the Justice Department guys handed me something, and I looked at it, looked it up. It was my mother's Hungarian Nazi party card.
Wow.
And that was the other person.
So just to
Wow.
clarify also for people, Joe's mother at that time was deceased. So it was just Joe and his father. That's
No,
it.
no, no, no,
Was your mom still alive?
no, no. You mean at the time of the hearings?
Yes.
My mother's
Yes.
dead.
Okay. So your mother
My
is
mother
dead.
died in 67,
Right.
1967. Yeah.
So it's just you and your dad. That's it. That's the family
Well,
you
no,
have.
no. I'm in my first marriage. I have two children already.
Right.
So of course I have my own family.
Your own family, yes.
Yeah.
And so you're sitting there listening to this. Tell us a little more about how this proceeds and what your dad's saying and what these agents are saying and how is your lawyer defending all this, or is he trying to defend this? What's happening?
I'll back up a little bit. The next day, they sent us the copy of Nemzet Politika. Which my dad said he had written when he was 20 some years old, and he didn't really remember what it was in it. But it couldn't have had anything to do with this because he was not an anti-Semite. So we get the copy, and to my absolute shock, I discovered that the American Justice Department has done a complete translation of the entire book into English. And Jerry and I are looking through the book. My father is sitting there and in Jerry's office and sort of staring out the window. And we're reading through the book, and as we page through it, we are more and more in shock. And I'm more and more heartbroken because there are things in it, words in it like Jews are parasites preying on the state, and the Jews Get the word exactly right. The Jews must be hit with the full iron fist of the law, and our society must be rid of them.
Wow.
The
Wow. Wow.
yeah,
What's your dad doing while they're reading this?
staring out the window, and stone faced, just staring out the window as we're going through this stuff, right? He's not commenting on any of it. And there are there are like half a dozen more of these kind of references. Jews are vermin, and Jews, there is Nazi heroization and Hitler heroization in it. I got the feeling as I read it that I was reading the Hungarian version of Mein Kampf. It had that kind of poison in it. And so, at a certain point, we look at him and I say to him, in Hungarian, what about this? And he said, did you write these? Write this? And he said, well, it's there. I must have, but I must have forgotten. I didn't remember. So
What a
you
gut punch, man.
didn't remember, yeah, it was a heartbreak, and the whole experience from that moment on turned to an absolute heartbreak. It was the greatest heartbreak of my life, even in retrospect.
Joe, just very quickly before you get into any additional details, do you think your dad was really advocating for inclusiveness and don't judge anybody by their religion or their color? Was he somehow doing that either consciously or subconsciously as a cover up to in a way to position it that I would never have written those things should that ever surface? I know that's kind of that might be a leap. I'm just curious if you had thought
No,
about
no,
that.
it's not a leap. I discussed that exact theme in one of my books. There are various possibilities. Um, did he say those things to me because he regretted the things that he had done in Hungary, and he had a son that he loved, and he didn't want him to have that same kind of poison? Did he regret his actions? Or, another theory, did he do that to establish an alibi for himself in Hungary in this new world so that, I mean, in the United States in this new
Yes.
world, so it would be discovered what he did in Hungary? And with my success, did he take such pride in my success because he thought that the more successful I became, and I was been very outspoken, in the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement against prejudice, and I participated in the marches and wrote endless columns about it in the Plain Dealer and another publication. Did he think, there is my alibi solidified, and it will cover me because of who he is? Or, excuse me, and as Jerry Messerman pointed out, did they really begin their investigation because of Music Box? There was an interesting beat that I must relate to you. In the research that I did for Music Box, I had a researcher who worked for Erwin Winkler, and I was really busy, and I did a lot of reading and stuff about the Hungarian Holocaust, and I talked to people in the United States about it. But the actual physical research with the Justice Department was done by my researcher. And when afterwards he sent me a lengthy memo. He had talked to some of the same people who wound up at the hearings. He sent me a lengthy memo, which I thanked him for. But we didn't know whether the movie itself or whether the research that I had done through Nelson McCormick alerted the Justice Department that there was something there that they wanted to investigate.
Hmm.
So in that sense, what I wrote may have uncovered his alibi.
Well,
Joe,
It's very twisted stuff
yeah.
and a lot of possibilities. Jerry Messerman felt, and I respect his judgment. Jerry Messerman felt that of all the criminal cases that he'd been in, and then you're talking about 40 years of them at that point, that my father was the most manipulative man that he'd ever met.
Oh God.
Joe, I know this is a a very difficult question to answer, and I know you've addressed this in the past, but I think it's worth bringing up again for our listeners who are probably asking themselves this question. Looking back now, plus years after these events, is there any part of you that believes that Music Box came out of a subconscious notion that this was actually the truth, that somehow you kind of knew this, and even if you've blocked off the memory, because I think you said in your book, everybody's going to believe, if this comes out, everybody's going to believe that I knew, because it does set up, another layer of that alibi. I don't believe that that's the truth. I don't think you did it purposely. But is there any part of you that subconsciously just understood what you were actually writing about?
It's a very good question. It's one that I've wrestled with for a long time. It's very possible that I blocked something in retrospect, and I played out this internal detective puzzle through the years about what could I have known, what could I have seen, where did it. There are some things that occurred to me. There was a moment when I was about, I'm guessing, around 8 or 9 years old. We had this upstairs, a tiny apartment, and the Franciscan publishing office was downstairs, the first floor, next to the bar that I told you about. So our windows looked out right on their offices and on the bar. And one night I woke up. I slept in the living room in a couch because the place was so small. One night I woke up to my parents, both of them up at the middle of the night, staring out the window and looking frightened. And then, of course, I woke up and I was frightened too because I didn't know what was going on. And they told me that someone had broken in downstairs to the publishing office, and that they saw them going into it. They heard the window, they broke into it. And my mother and father were standing there watching, and then they saw two guys come out, and they were wearing suits and hats, and they walked to this car. And my father said, and I remembered this in retrospect during the hearings, after the hearing, FBI, the FBI. And I wondered through afterwards why they thought this was the FBI, why not burglars?
Mm,
You know,
wow.
what's why? The other moment was the other thing that I remembered after the hearings was the great panic in my household for some time when I was about 13, 12 or 13. The My mother had taken the my father's wallet, left it in pants, and taken it to the dry cleaner across the street. And the wallet was gone, and the last that time she remembered that it was in the pants that went to the dry cleaners. What terrified them wasn't the wallet because we didn't have any money. The green card was in the wallet, and they were afraid that this green card would somehow cause them trouble. Well, they didn't want anything. In retrospect, they didn't want anything going to the immigration people that would somehow alert their attention to whatever they
Wow.
were afraid of. So they were just sure. I think it's very possible that I saw something, that I heard something that I blocked, especially because even as a young man, I was reading things like The Last of the Just by Andre Schwartzman, and then while the 6 million died, so and it could be that my feelings were absolutely in head-on collision mode. The other thing that's relevant, I think, in terms of blocking it is William Faulkner had a great thing that I've spent a lot of time thinking about since the events of my father. Faulkner said, there is no pain as painful as the human heart in conflict with itself. I love my father. I wouldn't be the man I am without my father, and I hate my father for what he
Wow.
did. And those feelings will never be resolved, and they exist together in my heart, and that's painful indeed.
Joe, as you're sitting there during this trial, and you talked about, this could I have subconsciously known some things, and these agents are sitting there and they're talking to your dad. They got to be wondering, or are they wondering about you and saying, okay, did you ever become suspect in this? And did your career or fame or celebrity come to play in this investigation? And if so, how?
In terms of being a suspect, the two men leading this investigation, Neil Scher and Eli Rosenbaum, we we immediately sensed that we were sitting on the wrong side of the table. That I was on the wrong side of the table because I was sitting with my father and Jerry. There was a vibe in the place immediately. They had read everything. They had seen my movies. They had read lengthy interviews with me. There was no question that I don't think there was any question and there couldn't possibly have been any question like that as it unfolded because it was obvious that my heart was broken. And no question of that. And then we also Eli and I admired both men greatly. Eli's parents were in Israel, I think in Tel Aviv at the time. And the it was during the Iraqi War, the hearings. Tel Aviv had been bombed, and Eli was very concerned about what was going on. Jerry Messerman's office didn't have a TV set, so that they could check the news. So I bought one, and then put it in Jerry's office. And then I had a very lengthy record that they knew about, on these levels, and they saw how difficult it was.
So how does the rest of this investigation play
Yeah.
out?
We had the hearings. It's now their decision on whether they want to deport him. If they deport him, then he will be put on trial in Hungary. He is 83 years old, and they made a decision not to deport him and essentially dropped the case.
Joe, is it just a moment of universal weirdness? We're having this discussion at 83, right? And that's the age of your dad right now. He was sitting there with the risk of being sent back home to stand trial. That I can't imagine how frightened he must have been. But one other thing you mentioned to
I
me,
have
if
to,
I
I
may.
have to correct you,
Yeah,
incidentally, because I'm 2 years younger. I'm 81.
81.
And
You
those
said 83 at the
two years,
beginning of
two
this.
years make a lot of difference, so it's just on 81.
Well,
But
well,
my dad was 83.
but the other thing that you have mentioned to me in the past, I want to make sure, or that I read, I don't know, just to clarify, was there a point in this trial when Messerman said, your lawyer said, "Are you going to basically punish the son for the father's sins?" Did that occur during this discussion? And saying you can't, you're going to ruin this guy's career over something the father did.
I don't think it came up formally. He may have told him that. Because he had a communication with them. It was obvious that if this blew into full-scale public hearing and if he was deported, it would get a terrific amount of publicity. And I knew something about that because incidentally I had covered the Demyanjuk trial in Israel, a couple of years before. And this, of course, wouldn't have assumed those kind of proportions, but nevertheless, journalistically, it would have been a good story. Partly because of the difference between the father and the son politically, and what I had done or what he had done.
That's an interesting point. I don't want, or an interesting wrinkle to this, or not even wrinkle, but just a piece of this story. Could you explain to some of the viewers who may not know the Demyanjuk trial and who he was
In a
exactly?
minute I will, but I wanted to add a point to
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
The point is if they didn't deport him because of reasons having to do with me, then ultimately, did I save him? Was that really in the final moment his alibi? I'm sure that the OSI would deny that, but on a human level, I wonder if that occurred to them.
Wow.
It's the ultimate irony if that
Yeah.
happened anyway.
If you could go back,
John Denman trial, it happened in the late '80s, I think, and I was there at United Artists' behalf, and doing research. It was a very interesting trip. I'd never been in Israel. I took Jerry and my two kids from our marriage, and we went to Israel through Dachau. And I wanted the kids to see a camp, so we began in Munich, through Dachau, and then went to Tel Aviv, and we were in Israel for 2 weeks, and got a chance to really see the country from Eilat all the way up north, all the way through. Went to Masada. The It was one of the most educational trips in my life.
Just to clarify, Demjanjuk was actually a guy from Cleveland who they suspected of Nazi war crimes as well, or being a guard or something. And you were actually back there covering that
His
trial.
trial. His trial. I regret the fact that he was from Cleveland as much as I regret the fact that I'm Hungarian at certain times.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Mark. You had a question.
no, I was, yeah, again, just a thought experiment. If if you could go back in time, would you still have written Music Box, knowing what you know now?
Really interesting question. Um, I think the answer is yes. I would have done it with some pain if I would have known that, but I think I would have written it. Yeah.
Hmm.
Joe, is there any, you mentioned the irony of it, but not really the deeper impression of it. You saved your dad. I mean, you could argue that the lawyer you had, your presence, we'll never know what level of your fame came into play to save your dad. That has to be kind of a dichotomy in terms of your feelings about that. You saved the man who was doing some of the things you were actually marching and fighting and writing against.
It's Faulkner's ultimate dichotomy.
Yeah,
It's love and hate at the same time.
yeah,
Art in absolute conflict, at war is the way I would put it, with itself.
yeah.
And that's a very, very painful thing to live through.
I can't imagine. So, Joe, tell us. So here we are.
I have read, it's, I think if I can add, I
Yep,
have read, there's a wonderful Gerald Posner book. It's called Hitler's Children, and that's metaphoric title. But he interviewed Mengelé's kids and Himmler's kids and Goering's kids and all of that, about how they felt when they discovered the full horror. In their case, they all had a limited horror, unless they were very little, but the full horror of how they felt from Mengele, for example,
yeah,
especially Mengele, because he continued his relationship by mail when he had fled to Paraguay with his children who were in Germany, right? And I read another book that was also really interesting on this level. It's the BTK killers, the serial killer's daughter wrote a book. I think it was called The Serial Killer's Daughter. This man had maintained a terrific family life, great to his kids, and he had 13 women over the years, over 30 years, in the most horrendous, brutal ways. Um, the so on a limited level, I had, those had and have those kind of feelings.
so here we are. They've got all the information.
I'm sorry, I keep it. One other thing, Elie
Yeah,
Wiesel, who was one of my heroes, incidentally, who speaks Hungarian better who spoke Hungarian better than I do, because the part of Romania he was from essentially bounced back and forth between Hungary and Romania. He said something that was good to remember, and I remembered it through the years. I've read many, many of his books, and it is. He said, only the guilty are guilty, the children are not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
That's
that's
what I think.
I think that's the important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So Joe, they have all the information and they're going away to make the decision. How does that unfold, and how do you ultimately learn your dad's plight? And how did that
No,
affect your
no,
relationship?
no drama. The
Yeah.
Jerry Messerman gets a call and says we dropped the case. So
They dropped the case.
yeah, they dropped, that's why they wasn't deported. They dropped
Right,
the case.
right, right. So and then when that happens, where does that leave you and your relationship with your father? How
Well,
how did that change?
everything that happened totally destroyed my relationship with my father. The He lived for I think about 4 or 5 years after that, maybe more. The I didn't see him. I paid for his nursing care. I went to his funeral, but when he was dying, I heard that he kept calling for me and calling for me, and I didn't go to see him. The it's exactly as I tried to describe it. I loved him and I hated him. The and I let him die that way. He left a note saying that he wanted to be buried in Hungary, and asked that I send his body back. And of course, I got him a very simple grave here in Cleveland.
Wow. So you did not see him at all after this
Some
incident?
on occasion, but I didn't let my children see him. And Naomi and I went to his funeral. But that was pretty much it.
Man, that I can't imagine processing that over the remaining years. The guy that was
Oh,
uh,
there was an interesting moment. 'Cause I wouldn't take his calls, and I wouldn't see him. And one day the cops in Malibu showed up, and they said they were doing a wellness check because my father had called them to make sure that I was okay.
yeah, he was trying to reconnect. Well,
Look, it's more complicated than reconnecting. I think my father loved me, and he was caught in the probably the same kind of trap that my heart was caught in.
he had to feel like he let you down. Obviously, he let you down. I'm sure he was embarrassed. I'm sure he regretted. I think he regretted what he did. I mean, I would assume.
We
Did
don't
you
know.
send?
We don't. Those things are lost in the grave for me. I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't know whether he regretted and what he regretted. But I hope he did. I hope he regretted. But I really don't know the answer to that. I do know that he loved me. The Whether that love survived as mine did, and the two things together lived until he died. Maybe that happened with him too.
we've
Well,
been at this almost an hour, believe it or not, Joe.
yeah.
And
And thank you for once again sharing just
it,
to Jeremy's point. I could not imagine what the level of emotional turbulence you must have been feeling this entire time. Probably, I'm sure there's a corner of your heart where this still is turbulent and unresolved. So I really appreciate you coming on and taking your time to talk about this with such candor and clarity.
yes. And Mark, I want to add, Joe,
Thank you for that, Mark. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to end on one last question, Joe. If your dad were on this call right now, what would you say to him? What would be that one thing, that one moment in time you have a chance to say one last thing to your father? What would it be?
I say things to my father every day, and I do that privately. So I'm sorry, guys, but I'm not going to let you know what I say to him.
Yeah,
No,
yeah. Fair
that's fair.
enough. Fair enough. Listen, gentlemen, this has been
Yeah.
wonderful and fantastic, and
Well,
elucidating.
I think we have one more session to discuss.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, we're gonna come back with one more session.
Yeah.
To our listeners, our audience, if you've been listening to us for a while, or if you know us personally, that we really keep it light and fun and quirky and playful. And as Jeremy said, we were going to shift tones a little for this episode, and I've got to say, for the 25 odd episodes we've been doing this, this is far and away the most intense and heart-wrenching of these that we've done. So, everybody, I just want to say thank you for hanging with us, for listening. Again, we do have a little bit more of Joe's story to tell, some interesting stories. Again, I share a bit of that story with him that we'll talk about next week. But yeah, Joe, thank you for all this.
Mark,
This is amazing.
I want to thank you especially because I know that what we discussed today wasn't easy for you either. And
Yeah.
thank you for your questions. I think your questions were sensitive and incisive, and I'm happy that I did this with you guys. Okay.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
thank you. And so next episode, we're going to get into something that occurred in Joe's life, where he was diagnosed with cancer, and a very life-threatening form of cancer, as we kind of alluded to at the very top of this conversation. I just want to let listeners know, for all those that have had their own life journey with cancer, Mark alluded to that as well, and those who have just been through some really tough struggles in life. For this episode, it's those who have struggled with family members and had their own family issues. And this next episode talks about a really, really tough journey Joe went through that literally almost took his life and destroyed his career. So,
But it will also be much brighter
yeah.
because at the end of that struggle, I discovered a great friendship with my friend Jesus Christ, or Jesus of Nazareth. And his presence in my life has meant almost as much as my wife's presence, my wife Naomi's presence in my life, and much more than Jeremy's presence has meant in my life.
Joe, if
Yeah.
if even in a somber conversation like this, you can't help but take a shot at me, but that's okay. That's all
Yeah.
right. I still love you,
Yeah.
man.
Listen, we must always smile, and you made that very easy for me through
Yeah.
32.
Well, there you go. And this, speaking of love and hate, that's our relationship. There you go. But I love you, brother.
Also,
Yeah.
I just want to say, for those of you out there who may hold this grudge against your dad for not coming to your soccer games, or
Yeah.
not being there for you on, to help you out with this situation, uh fucking get over it. Go talk to your fucking dad, because you didn't go through what Joe went through, and he still loved the man who was, frankly, uh in my mind, you could argue, not deserving of his love.
You know what?
um
I will add one sentence to what you just said because I thought it was profound. One brief sentence. My fucking father.
That's great. That's a great book
Absolutely.
title, Joe. That's a great book title.
Thank
All
you,
right,
guys.
listen, everybody out there, stay ugly, irresponsible, and childish, my friends. I'm Jeremy Baca.
I'm Mark Levy, and we'll be back next week.
Thank you, everybody.